can find no real evidence of stories of vampires in Shropshire. However, the Gothic thriller Crucible of the Vampire was shot entirely in Shropshire in 2016. It tells a story of an ancient cursed artefact which draws a young university researcher to an old country manor, Acton Reynolds House, which holds a dark and terrible secret. O'Reilly's house, Shrewsbury, stands in as the university office in the film, Acton Reynolds Hall. The Nag's Head in Pontesbury, the Isle Estate and the Shropshire Hills also feature. A Dracula movie was going to be shot in Shrewsbury in 2016, but the production company decided on other locations. Wolf Manor is a horror comedy vampire movie and was shot in an old abandoned house in Shropshire. Guy N. Smith, 1993, The Knighton Vampire, is set in the Welsh town of Knighton, which is just across the border, literally just across the border. Jason Watkins, the actor who notoriously played evil vampire Herrick in Being Human, is from Albrighton. Albrighton received its charter granting the borough status in 1303, which was renewed in 1662 for rather unusual reasons. The charter declared that because Albrighton then adjoined Staffordshire on the south east and west sides, felons and other malefactors fled Staffordshire to escape prosecution because there was no resident justice of the peace in that part of Shropshire, and on account of its remoteness from Shrewsbury, Shropshire's county town. A small jail and stock stood somewhere near the Crown public house, whilst a room above it was used for various village meetings and transactions. There was a toll house nearby. Close to Albrighton is White Lady's Priory. The dedication was to Leonard Noblack, a saint associated with the liberation of prisoners, who was extremely popular after a number of alleged miracles earlier in the 12th century. It's now accepted that the priory belonged to the Augustine order. John Leyland was commissioned in 1533 by Henry VIII to investigate the libraries of religious houses in England. As a part of his duties, he visited White Lady's shortly after its dissolution in 1536. He originated the false idea that White Lady's was a Cistercian house. Certainly, Cistercians wore a white habit, while the colour of the Augustine habit could vary, the primary element being the wearing of white linen rochet, similar to those of the canons. However, there is little that we can be certain about the priory, nor its White Ladies. The White Ladies of Faux, or Dame Blanche, are said to drain the blood of young men. Originating in the Jura Lake region of France, they seduced young men with their beauty and magic, leading them to some remote part for their fate. A bizarre tenuous connection, yes. But when I lived in French Quarter of New Orleans, it was opposite the Ursuline convent. Young novices were sent from France with their belongings in large caskets. Hence they became known as the casket girls. Locally, these casket girls were believed to be vampires, who still sleep in their caskets in the mysterious top floor of the convent. There is a little more to report from neighbouring counties. In the Middle Ages, when Gilbert Folliot was the Bishop of Hereford, Herefordians were suspicious of the Welsh, mainly because they burnt down the cathedral. There were some notable events. Heuno, a Hereford resident, was disliked for being Welsh, and his smell of urine from working as a tanner which was actually used in the processing of leather. In fact, they used to have to tread on the hides, which were soaked in urine. So, yeah, you would have stunk of it. Heuno worked during the night time. Townsfolk would leave him a cup of vinegar and a full bucket outside of their door, which he then collected in exchange for a penny. Due to his strange appearance, Heuno was very prominent teeth, and people were very scared of him. When Heuno died, most folks sighed in relief. He wasn't particularly liked, but would be missed on account of the pennies that would no longer be available. His neighbour, a baker, however, was probably the most pleased to hear the news of his death. He had lived with the foul smells of urine far too long. That was until 3 days later, when he was awoken from his slumber to hear Heuno's voice through his door, asking to be let in so he could warm himself by the fire. The baker told Heuno to go away, and he did. And as he did, a spine-killing cackle came out of the dark. Next morning, the baker was found gravely in bed, feverishly, with staring eyes, red, and suspicious teeth marks on his neck. After 3 days, he was dead and buried in the cathedral graveyard, where Elgar's statue now stands. Plague then beset Hereford, with many people fell ill and died, mirroring the symptoms of the baker. And the rich began to worry. The knight, Sir Walter Loudon, visited the bishop for advice. Sir Walter was advised to dig up Heuno's body, to cut off the head with a spade, douse the body in holy water, and then rebury it, which he did. That night, Sir Walter was awakened by scratching outside his door. Hearing Heuno's voice, he knew he was in mortal danger. So he drew his sword and ran out in the night, wearing only his shirt, to see a shrouded figure running towards the cathedral. The shroud was moth-eaten. Heuno's limbs were flapping uncontrollably, and his head flopped backwards and forwards. Sir Walter caught up with the figure and swiftly beheaded it, and the head flew off the body and the torso dropped to the ground. The plague disappeared. Life in Hereford returned to normal, and Sir Walter was a hero. I came across a story. I suspect it's simply an interesting yarn of Judith from Winsford, who had flu-like symptoms in the 1970s. I wish I could tell you who the storyteller was, as he does it so well, but it's just something I found randomly on the internet, uncredited. She would get worse and then appeared bite-like marks on her neck. This was accompanied by waking during the night. She was referred to a psychiatrist, whom she described a nightly visitor who got into bed with her. The visitor was said to resemble a Hungarian artist in the area. But when a younger girl visited the psychiatrist, she repeated the same story about the artist. The psychiatrist visited the Hungarian and found amongst his paintings those of the two girls. When the psychiatrist returned home, he found his cat dead on the doorstep. That night a mirror broke. Then he spotted a shadow of the man at the top of the stairs. At around 3 o'clock his wife awoke, screaming, claiming that something was trying to strangle her. The psychiatrist gave the girls crucifixes to wear around their necks and Bibles to put by their beds. This appeared to work. But one night it seemed to be confronted by the Hungarian, who claimed that he would snap the psychiatrist's neck. On revisiting the Hungarian, he was said to have gone. Now you might imagine this to be the end of this story, but in 1972 a Polish potteries worker in Stoke was found dead in his boarding house. The walls were covered with crucifixes, and on the floor covered in salt. His landlady explained he had a fear of vampires. On the windowsill there was human excretion mixed with salt. A post-mortem discovered that the Pole had died of asphyxiation from choking on a pickled onion. But on a second post-mortem, the pickled onion was found to be a clove of garlic. Could this be related to the Winsford incident? Well, in 1991, a lady from Winsford saw a man on a ceiling in black with burning eyes. When she looked again, the figure was gone. It turns out that this was in the same house where Judith had lived. At Woolas Hall, Eckington near Pershore, a Victorian priest's vampire-slaying kit was found complete with a wooden stake, holy water, a Bible's mirror and a pocket pistol. In Welsh folklore it's said that dead men are doomed to join Arawn and his hounds, who would visit earth to drink the blood of the living and the dead. That is, the blood of corpses. Arawn hunted the ambitious and sinful, but you did not have to be doomed to join the hunt in order to return as a vampire. Arawn is the king of the other world, the legend being related to the wild hunt, found in England and Northern Europe, including that of Wild Edric in Shropshire. A Carmarthenshire yeoman died, leaving his money and possessions to his eldest son. When the man died, he was duly laid out and the death chamber was shut for the night. In the morning they found marks on his body, which everyone said to have been made by a vampire. A Baron Hill Beaumaris Anglesey certainly looks like it contains the undead. Built in 1612, it underwent various stages of development, but was fire damaged in the Second World War and abandoned. There are some reports of vampiric activity connected with the mansion, but these are of modern origin. A large old farmhouse on the edge of the Brecon Beacons was taken over by new tenants. They discovered that some of the old furniture belonging to the previous occupants still filled many of the rooms. They were dusted down and a fire lit in the hearth when a pious minister was due to stay as a weekend guest. He arrived on the Friday night quite exhausted from his journey and retired to his chamber early, where he sat in an armchair by the window and read from his Bible before falling asleep. Through the night he was tormented by bad dreams, and when he woke he spotted a wound on the back of his hand was bleeding. He wrapped it with a handkerchief and commented to the lady of the house over breakfast that there may be a couple of nails in the armchair that need attention, and he showed her his wounds. She was quite shocked, as the previous visitor who'd stayed in that room had complained of the same thing. So she already had the armchair overhauled by an upholsterer. She went to the room and checked the chair over herself, but could find nothing that could have caused the wounds. The following evening, the minister once again fell asleep in the armchair, after spending some hours reading his Bible. He was awoken by the feeling which he described as if being gnawed by a dog. He had a pain which ran down the left-hand side of his body, and he felt so weak that he struggled to get back to his feet and strike a light. When he finally did, he lifted his shirt to see the wounds across his rib cage, like those he'd seen on the back of his hand, all of them oozing with blood. An exorcism was said, and when the minister departed the house, he declared that the malignant spirit had been put to rest. But in 1850, a dignitary of the Church of England stayed at the house and reported the same unpleasant experience, and could show similar wounds on the left hand, arm and leg. There is, however, a story of St Julian's graveyard in Shrewsbury from the 1790s. Mr. Tor, a cook from out of town, was residing at the Lion Hotel and was found stone cold in his bed one morning by the maid. Some say he was poisoned by the publican of the Three Fishes, for failing to pay his dues. Others that it was the owner of the Lion where he was staying. Locals used the money they found in his pocket for a burial, and the very next day he was buried at St. Julian's. That night passers-by heard the sound of scraping near where the man had been buried. When the gravediggers exhumed the body, scratch marks were present from inside the coffin. On most silent nights you can still hear terrible groaning noises from the graveyard. As such misdiagnosis was not uncommon. Indeed, some Victorians had bells attached to the inside of their coffins, just in case this happened to them. Others used a mortsafe, often iron bars over the grave, largely to prevent grave robbers, but could also be used to prevent the dead from rising. Could these be the instances of the origin of vampire legends?